Few days late, but Floyd Mayweather versus the notorious Conor McGregor has come to a close, and I had a few days to gather my thoughts and make a video on it. I have not disappeared. There's just been a lack of boxing on. Not so much. Important news as well. So it's been a bit dry. But obviously, the main event was on, and some of the undercard fights. So let's discuss that and let's build up to the main event. Kind of the three main fights I want to discuss are, you know, Badou Jack versus Cleverly, Gervonta Davis versus Fonseca, and Mayweather McGregor. Let's go with Gervonta Davis. Obviously, he missed weight, relinquished his IBF 130-pound title on the scales, and obviously it was a vacant title for Fonseca to win if he pulled off the upset. Thought Gervonta Davis didn't look as good as he normally did. Well, in his last few fights, I guess against Pedraza and Liam Walsh, he looked a real handful. I think he looked good in spots, but I did think Fonseca was catching him. Obviously undefeated, he came in with a bit of ambition, but for me, he was kind of like an opponent that was there to be beat for Gervonta Davis. But he done the job. I guess he done well in spots, and he got the W. So looks like probably be moving up to 135. I'm not so much bothered about the fight. The fight was a routine sort of win in the end, I guess, for Davis. What I am concerned about is him moving to lightweight. I know he's a very stocky sort of boxer, but for me, he's very small, even at 130. So the height dynamic has to come into consideration at some point. Um, you know, he probably going to be stopping growing in terms of height. In terms of the build, he'll probably put on more muscle mass, or probably just be more comfortable at 135. So the height concern will be a real detriment, I think, against the top level guys. The Linares, the Mikey Garcias, those sort of guys right at the top. Do you think the right sort of fighter may present itself for Gervonta Davis to win a belt? I think Robert Easter's there for the taking. I think he'd do pretty well against Terry Flanagan as well. I think he'd beat Terry Flanagan. But again, the height dynamic has to come into it, and it has to be factored in a lot more since he'll probably be moving up in weight soon. But yeah, he's got W, and let's see what his next sort of move is. Whether it be 135 or he tries to go for another title at 130. But he definitely seems a bit tight very tight at the weight for me. He did fail 3 times against Liam Walsh, so definitely the signs are looking towards a move to 135 for Gervonta Davis. Badou Jack versus Nathan Cleverly. Not exactly the fight it panned out to be. I thought it'd be a bit of a war. I thought Badou Jack was very good. He's a very underrated sort of performer. People don't really give him the credit. He done well against George Groves. He done very well against James DeGale. I think he beat Lucien Bute, even though he got robbed in that and got a draw. He's been very consistent, and he's turned around his career after the Derek Edwards knockout. Yeah, so I'm just thinking if it was a knockout. Yeah, it was. But for me, Badou Jack's really progressed, and he's done really well. I think he's moved up to 175. Obviously, he's looking for a big fight, and he got a semi-big fight against Nathan Cleverly. I thought Cleverly would probably bring a lot of output, maybe just a bit. He'd probably be the bigger man. But Badou Jack looked physically, he looked a lot bigger for me. I think he probably cuts down from closer towards 200 pounds. He is a big unit. He's about 6'1", 6'1.5" or so, and I'm around 6'2", so he's roughly around my height, and he looks like a real unit. He looks massive at 175. I would like to see him against the top level guys. I don't really need to talk about the fight against Cleverly. He kind of dismantled him after the second round. It was easy pickings for Badou Jack, and yeah, I'd like to see him against Adonis Stevenson. Obviously, he's called out Adonis Stevenson. That would be a very good fight. I think that'd be an exciting fight for the fans, and it's definitely a fight that can be made, especially with Floyd Mayweather being promoting Badou Jack, Al Heyman as a sort of mutual advisor for the two. Not a difficult fight to make. So what would be a concern is whether the WBA would actually you know order it as a unification because of the Jack holding the regular belt. So if he does drop that, and then he'll probably have to face Adonis Stevenson just for the WBC belt, which is better anyway. He's obviously on paper a two-time champion, and accolades aside, he deserves it. He's a he looks like a real good fighter, and he looks to have improved. He's coming towards probably the tail end of his career, 33, but he seems to have improved with age, and probably a welcome addition and a new force at 175 for me. He definitely slots in, you know, towards the bottom end of the top 10. Obviously just on beating Nathan Cleverly, but obviously if he can get big fights, there are some good fighters out there. Sullivan Barrera is a contender. Joe Smith Jr. is a contender. There are sort of good contenders, solid contenders out there. Yunieski Gonzalez, John Pascal still around. So there are potential fights there if he doesn't get the Stevenson fight. But yeah, he'll definitely grow and probably get better. So I hope he gets the fights that he deserves. To be honest, he seems like a likable guy as well. So yeah, best of luck to Badou Jack. Nathan Cleverly, I was short note on him. He retired after the fight. He sent out a tweet saying too many wars and it's best to hang up the gloves now. He's had a good career. Obviously, he won a regular version of the belt, but on paper, two-time champion of the world. Kind of with not the sort of background in boxing that he that others would have. He's done very well and he's had a very good career. And best of luck to Nathan Cleverly. He has as far as I know, he has a 2-2 in pure mathematics or something like that. So, he's not going to be struggling outside the ring anytime soon. He's definitely got things going for him later down the line. So, yeah, good luck to Nathan Cleverly. Nice bloke. He's done what he needed to do in boxing. He's made not the greatest money. He obviously only made 100K for this fight, which was a bit of a shame. I would have preferred to see him get closer towards at least a 300K or something like that as a defending champion. But obviously these purses in boxing happen for a reason. The event and whatnot didn't allow him to get that purse, which was a bit of a shame. But he's done what he needed to do in boxing, as I said, and he's obviously gone out of the game. Hopefully he can stay in, maybe just become an analyst or something like that. But as I said, he doesn't really need it. He's doing well well off outside the ring. So yeah, best of luck to the kid. Main event: Mayweather versus McGregor. I'm not going to really go into detail on the fight, and the fight broke down how it broke down and whatnot. We'll probably talk about it on the podcast. Hopefully, this goes up before the podcast on the Wednesday. So yeah, I mean, it was a fight where for me the deficiencies were evident from both guys. More so Conor McGregor than Floyd Mayweather, and I thought for all the people going back and forth on Twitter, on social media, etc. I really think Floyd just he didn't look great, but he allowed himself to not look great and just walk Conor McGregor down. And if Conor McGregor is really gonna be suffering a KO defeat to Floyd at 40, a Floyd that he was in shape. Don't get me wrong, but he was not training for this fight hard. He was doing training, but he definitely was taking days off and whatnot, and he was probably less respectful of Conor McGregor's power and skill set rather than a Manny Pacquiao or Sal Canelo Alvarez or something like that. But obviously the fight broke down how it did, and Conor McGregor obviously got walked down and stopped by Floyd. Floyd did what he needed to do, I guess. There isn't too much to add on the main event. What I'd like to, I guess, talk about is what are Conor McGregor's next sort of options, boxing or MMA. I'm a fan of both, so I'm not gonna say I'm the most hardcore MMA fan, but I do follow it relatively closely. So I do know there are some options out there for him. Floyd, there isn't much to discuss on him. He's obviously going back into retirement, and I think that's for the best. If he fought a hungry lion, maybe an Errol Spence, or one of the hungrier lions, Terence Crawford, if he moves up, I do think he'd probably lose. He'd be training harder, and he'd probably be he'd be much more wary of their skill set and power. But I do think at this stage in his career, Floyd looked to have slightly declined, and even though he had enough for Conor McGregor, who was a novice, 0-0 in the professional boxing ring, I do think at this stage, I think Floyd is best keeping his 50-0 record, and not allowing Father Time to catch up to him. So yeah, best of luck to Floyd in his sort of retirement. He's obviously one of the best fighters of this generation. I'm a relatively young guy, and for me, watching Floyd over the years, he was phenomenal. Really, really phenomenal. I remember 10 years ago, he's fighting the likes of maybe Zab Judah, Miguel Cotto, Ricky Hatton. You know, those guys when I was very, very young. That was about 10 years ago, and I'm not relatively old now at the moment. So watching him growing up, he obviously wasn't the fighter that we know in his sort of last few fights against Canelo Alvarez or Manny Pacquiao, but he was he was a serious operator. You could tell he was elite pound for pound, and he could adapt, adjust, make it awkward for any opponent. On top of being able to knock people out, which he showed it in the Ricky Hatton fight, Victor Ortiz fight. Those sort of opponents were very, very good opponents. They were not knockover jobs, and he done a demolition job on some of them. So obviously I'm not saying Floyd's a knockout artist, but back in the day he was very exciting, and he's adapted his style regardless of whether his style isn't the best to watch, which obviously it's not the most pleasing on the eye, but you have to appreciate his skill set. Very, very elite skill set and one of a kind, especially in this generation, or when I was growing up. For me, he was just probably the best. And yeah, going back to Conor McGregor, didn't disgrace himself completely, I guess. Did give him some stick on the podcast and whatnot. Fair enough, but I think his deficiencies were evident. His punching technique was pretty poor, especially in terms of boxing. I mean, MMA is a bit different, but because you can take people down and use submissions and whatnot and be unorthodox, and that works to your advantage. But in boxing, he was unorthodox to the point that he was amateurish. Not even amateurish. It was like white collar at times for Conor McGregor, and I'm a big I'm a big Notorious fan. I really like his sort of style in MMA. I like him in MMA, and he's a very, very entertaining character. He's ridiculously funny, and some of the things he comes out with, he has some serious balls. I give him that. But in boxing, it's hard to see where he goes. I know he fights at 155, which is the lightweight limit in the UFC. He fought at 154 for this fight. Came in, decent shape. He didn't look particularly weight drained or anything. I think he wasn't conditioned for a 12 round 3 minute a round fight. I just think he really struggled with that because MMA is a different intensity to boxing, especially when you're not used to boxing and you're planting your feet differently, you're moving differently. It's very, very tough. Combat sport aside, it is hard to transition and do that. It's similar with boxers to MMA. James Toney lost to Randy Couture in 1 round. So, it's very, very hard. It is hard. No one's saying it's easy, but he didn't disgrace himself. He done some things that were good. I think Floyd let him do that, not taking that away from Conor McGregor. Obviously, the CompuBox stat that he landed more punches than Manny Pacquiao. I think only 6 or 7 less than Canelo Alvarez. But I think again, Floyd did. Floyd has declined from the Canelo days and even the Manny Pacquiao days. That he allowed him to be caught and Conor McGregor kind of, he didn't, as I said, the stat doesn't disgrace himself, but that stat isn't, I guess, as relevant. It's not as you can't use it as a sort of a base to start off or finish off. It is a stat, but at this stage in Floyd's career, with his final fight, not really training properly, saying he openly saying he's looking to knock Conor McGregor out and walk him down. I think it kind of plays hand in hand. So there's that. Obviously, the Paulie Malignaggi beef. There's a potential there for a fight. Paulie, obviously, in camp he didn't look in fighting shape. I don't know why he was sparring Paulie Malignaggi in the first place to kind of get ready for Floyd. I understand obviously Paulie back in his day was a fairly decent boxer, but at this stage in his career he's way past finish. There's a few other fighters. I know he's friends with Andre Berto, maybe Sean Porter or someone like that. Get revenge or something like that. But those guys I think are a bit too hungry. Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, Errol Spence. And if he fights out 150, 154 in the boxing ring, Eris Landy Lara, you know, Jamel Charlo, the WBC champion. And I don't rate that Charlo, to be fair. There's a few others, obviously, Austin Trout. I think, the majority of them would probably knock out Conor McGregor. And, that's not me saying, that's not me trying to slate him or anything. I just think he's not able to transition his weight of his punches into the boxing ring. I think much of his stuff is actually pity patty punches, and he's not really using his jab effectively and that sort of stuff. So there are stuff for him to work on. He's 29, and I don't think you can really teach an old dog new tricks, especially in a completely different sport. Boxing and MMA for me are two different sports. You're not using kicks and that sort of stuff in a boxing ring, whereas in MMA you're using kicks, wrestling, submission, whatnot. So yeah, it's tough, but he could do well against sort of the lower end welterweights or light middleweights and that sort of stuff. But yeah, difficult to see where he goes in a boxing ring. He said he will be sitting down with Showtime and the UFC owners, Dana White, to discuss the next options. Tyron Woodley's an option if he wants to go up to so a welterweight in the UFC. So that there's a potential fight there. He's obviously the welterweight champion, Tyron Woodley. Good, pretty decent fighter, to be fair. Tony Ferguson, I think, is fighting someone I can't remember off the top of my head. That's a potential opponent. Nate Diaz Trilogy is a potential opponent. Khabib is a potential opponent. There are a lot of fighters. Max Holloway rematch if Holloway wants to move up to lightweight or he wants to move back down to featherweight. Conor McGregor, that's a potential fight. Jose Aldo rematch, maybe that might be on the cards. That's very, very unlikely, but there are options there for Conor McGregor in the UFC, and I'd like to see him go back to the UFC and do his thing there. He's a very, very exciting fighter. I'm glad he's actually made some money. His story is very inspiring, and yeah, he's a showman. He's a showman. So as I said, best of luck to Floyd in his retirement, and Conor can come again. He's 29. He still could probably make a lot of money, especially from the Nate Diaz trilogy. He can make a hell of a lot of money there, and he can go from strength to strength. And if he wants to come back into a boxing ring, there are some fights there. Obviously, the Paulie fight makes sense since the beef has kind of gone on between the two because of the sparring session. So I guess we'll see in due time. He said he'd like to fight again this year, whether or not that's boxing or UFC, we'll see. We'll see. It's interesting with Conor McGregor. He's an interesting character. Whether you like him or hate him, he's very interesting, and he gets people tuned in and turning on the TV sets for him. Let's put it that way. That's about it, really. To be honest, it wasn't a vintage night of boxing. It wasn't a vintage night. Let's put it that way. It was a spectacle rather than a real fight. We have the real fight in a few weeks: Canelo versus GGG. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Even the super flyweights are fighting. Rungvisai versus Chocolatito rematch. Quadras versus Estrada is a very, very good fight. Naoya Inoue is actually on the card as well. It's a very good card, and yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So there's some good boxing coming up. will be some fight reviews, analysis, and such coming up. Just bear with me until it comes. And there will be some news. I think I've read some news with some British fighters, Josh Warrington and a few others. So we'll try to cover that in a separate video. But for now, that's it. Like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff. You know how it is. And yeah, speak soon. Catch up. Peace.